I'm Dave D, and you're watching XP Team USA.
It's Thursday, it's 8 o'clock, and it's the Big Detecting Show. Good evening, Mr. Gaylor.
Evening, Dave. How are you?
I'm absolutely knackered. You know, the gym I go to, and I put the belt on at the gym. It's called an Uptivo belt, so basically it logs everything that I'm doing and whatnot. I thought to myself, I'm going to try that at work, see how we go. So I wore it in work today. Have a guess how many calories I've used today.
8?
7,500.
That's a lot. That's a hell of a lot.
It's killed me.
Did people take the mickey of you at work?
People do that anyway, but what?
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. Did you manage to get some raises then?
Well, I went back to work, as you know, and I've not wore a mask very regularly because I've not been out, and the mask's done me head in within a matter of hours. So I thought, right, it's coming off. So there you go.
Have you tried? What mask? The leather one with like the snooker ball?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah. COVID mask. Sorry.
Yes, COVID mask. Anyway, before tonight's guest joins us, Luke, can you run the video, please?
You know I love the Vikings, don't you? Of course. Hard to pick a favourite thing about the Vikings for me, but it might be the names. Things like sort of Eric, Bloodaxe. And I was thinking we should have Viking names. I've got one in mind for you. Bo Little Squeak. Oh, no, that's a good name. You don't get to choose your own name. Bo Little Squeaker. What am I?
Rick the detritus.
Rick the detritus?
Yes, you seem to find a lot of detritus.
Yeah. I don't like it, but I'm going to have to take it. I'm going to prove you wrong. By the end of the day, you're going to be calling me Rick Heavy Find. Let's go. Now,
After you?
what are we doing? Sliding? Oh, well, that's a bit quicker than I wanted it to be. No, I'm nervous.
Come on now, watch out.
There's a rock there. There's definitely a rock there.
River Hunters starts Monday the 5th of April on Sky History.
And that particular trailer didn't have enough of tonight's guest, Mr. Gary Bankhead, in it. Good evening, Gary. How are we?
I'm very well, gentlemen. Good evening.
Marvellous to have you on the show tonight. Been looking forward to this, haven't we, Adrian?
Yeah. Very interesting.
So, without further ado, what we ask first and foremost, Gary, is can you introduce yourself to the viewers?
Good evening, viewers. Gary Bankhead. I'm an underwater archaeologist. I'm based in Durham City in County Durham, the heart of the northeast of England. I've been an underwater archaeologist officially now for 5 years since I graduated in the Department of Archaeology at Durham University. It's something that I never set out to do, but here I am, thoroughly enjoying it. Before that, I was merely a sub-aqua diver, which I've been a diver for 30 years now, qualified British Sub-Aqua Club dive leader, dived extensively around the UK inshore waters and the Egyptian Red Sea. So I love that. Always been interested in archaeology. I guess originally I was a time team archaeologist, like probably many of you guys would have been. Loved the show. Always fascinated by the history and the discovery of those small things. And for me, it was the knowledge that the experts had. How did they know? How did they know all of those things about such a tiny little object? So probably about 2010 when I very first got into this and started to work very closely with the Department of Archaeology at Durham. Very quickly you become knowledgeable, and I think more than anything, it's a passion. And if you have a passion about something, then you quickly learn everything you possibly can about it. And that's where I am today.
Well, I've just had to tell Luke off because he's put your name wrong on screen, so I apologise for that. He's been saying it all day. So I do apologise. You took it off to change it, obviously. Luke, bad books. So you've started, obviously, doing everything. Your job normally has been a firefighter. Indeed, yes. Pretty much this time last year, I officially retired as a fire officer. I was a serving firefighter at County Durham and Darlington Fire and Rescue Service. I was a flexi-duty officer, and I retired after 30 years and 10 months of service. So quite a stint. Really, really looking forward to my retirement. As we all know, we went straight into lockdown, so it was a bit of a nightmare for everybody. It really was. But I think a lot of the skills I've learned in the fire and rescue service, for example, wearing breathing apparatus in confined space, the water rescue training as well, quite important aspect of everything I do in rivers, and having that, and that brings with it the confidence. So I guess it's that professional element of being a firefighter that rubs off with you and sticks with you. And the fire and rescue service has made me the man I am today. So I've got a lot of respect for the service and all of my colleagues who I've worked with. And really sad occasion, particularly when you're so young and active and you've got so much more to give, that you effectively need to retire for pension reasons. So here I am. In the last 11 months, I've been working with the local resilience forum and the COVID-19 single point of contact. So I'm heavily involved in the testing, the vaccination programs, everything that's happening up here in County Durham and Darlington. And you've done a hell of a lot for charity as well in the past as well, I've noticed on one of the websites that it's listed that you've done some very, very long distance walking, mountain climbing and all sorts.
Yes, it must have been about 15 years ago now. We a couple of colleagues of mine in the fire service, we were really interested in climbing mountains and challenge walks. We did as you imagine, quite a lot. And we live within 2 hours drive of the Lake District, so we were always going over there and doing some really good adventures. And one thing led to another. You'd have a pint after a particularly fantastic walk up a mountain in the lakes, or Scotland as well, which is not too far away. And you always say, where next? Where can we go next? And one thing led to another. And in 2007, we ended up in Argentina, climbing Cerro Aconcagua, which is just shy of 7,000 meters. It's one of the 7 summits. It's the highest mountain outside of the Himalayas. So it's pretty high, and it's a place where people die. So, there's a lot of people being caught out with the incredible cold weather that you get up there. I think 14 of us set off on that adventure, and 10 of us made it to the summit. We got trapped for 3 nights, but that's another story. A story for another day.
Wow.
So you've had lots of fun anyway throughout your adult life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I played football until I was 50. Yeah, I love playing football. And for my sins, I was born within the catchment area of Sunderland Football Club, so I've been a long time sufferer for that. The number of times I think we've been relegated. So I've lost count. It's just awful, truly awful. And you realise eventually that playing football and supporting football, there's much more to life than that, and you have to leave it behind at some point and crack on with other adventures.
Bring back the Kevin Phillips days.
Yeah, my hero he was for a couple of seasons.
Absolutely. So,
Gary,
sorry, go on, Adrian.
What came first, the diving or the fire service, or did you look at starting diving when you started the fire service?
And it was just the fire service. No sooner had I joined, and you make a whole batch of new friends, new people who you end up socialising with and becoming really close friends. And one of them, his wife was in the local sub-aqua diving club, a BSAC club up here in the northeast. And we were in a bar one night having a chat, and she said, "Oh, come along, give it a try." And within a couple of weeks, I was sort of hooked, loved it. In those days, being a firefighter, we were firemen in those days, we were so badly paid. It was pretty tight, and nobody had any spare money. So to buy brand new sub-aqua kit was just out of the question. You literally had to beg, steal, and borrow the kit to get in and do those initial dives. So it was just, I think, within 6 months of becoming a firefighter, I started my course to learn how to dive at the local BSAC club.
Right.
I'd surmise that the using of the tanks obviously aren't dissimilar to the use of breathing apparatus. Obviously, a lot of differences, but being able to put one on is more or less second nature to you straight away.
It is, and yeah, and you're right. I alluded to that earlier. You're wearing a full face mask with probably, I think it was, I can't remember how many litres, 18 litres cylinder on your back with compressed air in. You got your helmet, your flash hood, all of the gear that goes with it. So it's quite heavy, but you're fit. You're in your prime of your life as a young firefighter, and you very quickly learn. The training is pretty intense, mind you. You go in the heat, the smoke, and that really well prepares you. And ultimately, throughout your fire service career, you will go into multiple burning buildings, literally, and try to either put the fire out or rescue people who might be trapped. And that happens more frequently than you perhaps realise. It's only the big fires that make the news. But every couple of weeks, as a firefighter, you'd be probably wearing breathing apparatus in a real job. And you quickly become very confident, proficient in it. You train all the time as well. So that confidence, that experience, the ability, when it's pitch black and you can't see your hand in front of you, even with a torch, you can't see through the smoke. The issues of claustrophobia and things like that, you quickly get over them, and you're just very professional. The training comes in, you do research techniques and everything. So to progress onto subaquia diving initially is a swimming pool, where the visibility, you can see one end to the other. It's just so easy. And if you can keep your demand valve in your mouth and keep your mask from flooding, remember to keep breathing. That helps as well. You very quickly develop the skills and learn to be a competent diver that way. So the transition was incredibly easy for me. I think more so because of that fire service background.
Yeah,
I completely agree. When I was doing industrial cleaning back in the 90s, I was on several BA courses with they give you the fog mask, and you have to make your way through mazes. And that's not even close to what firefighting is. But for me to actually be able to do that, with all the danger and the heat and everything else going on around you, couldn't imagine that. But the fog itself, that was something else. Obviously, thereafter you started to dive. Where were you originally diving?
It all goes back to the cost and expensive things initially. So I guess in those early years, it was very cheap or relatively cheap to literally drive to your local coast and go in off the beach or off the rocks and do what we call a shore dive. So you build up your experience at being based at Durham. I'm within 15 miles of the northeast coast. So you've got the major rivers of the Tyne and the River Wear pumping out all of their often dirty water into the North Sea. And so we did a lot of early scuba diving there, but you're always hindered by that poor quality of seawater. You couldn't really see very much. But the Farne Islands, Beadnell in particular, are just an hour away, just up the A1 motorway, and you could do a really good shore dive there. And once you develop your skills and you're competent doing those shore dives, you're naturally looking to get offshore. And fortunately for us, within I think 3 miles of sea houses is the Farne Islands, which is this incredible, beautiful marine environment. The wildlife up there is above the waves is especially fantastic anyway. And there's no big rivers polluting that area of the Northumberland coastline. It's beautifully clean and nearly all year round. And ultimately, we ended up doing a huge amount of diving in the Farne Islands, renting a boat and going out, maybe 10 divers and spending a day out there doing a couple of dives, and then come back in. And then eventually you're looking, where else could we go? And going up to Oban was the next logical step, particularly during the autumn and early winter, where the Gulf Stream kept that area really warm. So you could have a much longer, a greater extended dive season by going up there and diving the wrecks up in the Sound of Mull, which is just absolutely probably some of the best in the UK. So the most adventurous diving I've done was up at Scapa Flow, the German high seas fleet, which is scuttled just after the end of the First World War. And you had an incredible amount of huge monsters of battleships and pocket battleships and frigates. No, weren't frigates in them days. I don't know what the name. The smaller corvettes, all of the vessels that are just sunk, and they're pretty much still in situ. I know many of them are being raised and dragged out there for scrap, but there's still some wonderful, amazingly huge battleships up there. And the visibility is fantastic, but really, really challenging. They have very deep dives, typically 30-meter dives, just to get to the hull. And then you've got to go down underneath and amazing, and I'd recommend it to anybody, but only if you're fully competent, fully trained, and you've got the best kit, the best sub-aqua kit that money can buy, I guess.
How much are you looking at, Gary, for all the gear for the kit? If I say wanted to start tomorrow and do my qualifications, how much roughly are you looking for all the gear?
I've literally just had to replace my my diving regs, the old, and for a set of regs alone, which comes with a first stage and a second stage and a pony regs as well. You're looking about £450 brand new for a good set. You can pick them up second hand. I imagine half that, but that's just one bit. That's just the regs to go in. You would probably spend £150, £200 on a brand new cylinder for a 15-litre cylinder. You'd probably spend another £300, £400, £500 on a stab jacket. The dry suit is going to knock you back anything between 300 to 700 or 800 if you want the best. Then you throw in the hood, the gloves, the fins, the mask itself. Very quickly, you can spend £1,500 minimum to get your kit that's half decent to get you into the water safely. But you would expect a passionate diver to spend in excess of £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 on probably some good kit.
We can save your life, so I suppose it's quite important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you went abroad. You've been to the Red Sea diving and places like that as well since.
Yeah. The pretty much diving hard boats out of Sharm el Sheikh. So we go over with the dive clubs, about 10 of yous, go on a big liveaboard for a week and just hit all of the big wrecks. And the mecca for any diver is a wreck called the Thistlegorm. The SS Thistlegorm, a British merchant ship that was sunk during the Second World War. It was, I think the bombs, sort of one German bomb must have landed towards the stern of the ship and blew a big hole, and it quickly went down. But the vessel itself, which is quite substantial, remains, I would say, about 80% intact. It sits upright on the seabed, and it was crammed full of munitions and supplies for the British Army based in Africa at the time. And you can swim through jeeps and bikes and BMW old bikes that were in there, packs of 3 or 3 rifles. Every weapon you can imagine the British Army were using was crammed in there, and it just absolutely. And the marine life that's there is just absolutely outstanding. Everything you can imagine is there on the wreck. The big downside to that particular wreck is it's so popular. It's a magnet. So we were very fortunate that we were in a day boat, in a liveaboard. So we arrived there early in the evening, just as all of the day boats went back. So you're talking about, when I was there was about 35 to 40 day boats, each one crammed with about 10 people, who set sail at first light from Sharm or wherever they can, sail for about 3 or 4 hours to get to the wreck. Everyone dives in and then does a couple of dives and then goes home. But we got there just as they were going, so we did a couple of good night dives. And I remember doing a solo night dive, pitch black on this shipwreck, and all I had was my torch. And the marine, the fish that just came in, it was surreal. Slightly terrifying, because you always expect a great white just to take you from behind and munch you up, but hugely rewarding, and just you can understand why people will pay very good money to fly out there and dive that particular wreck time and time again. Yeah, just wonderful wreck, that one.
It's something I'd love to try, but I don't think I'm in the peak physical condition to do so anymore. But I ended up going, where did we go? Gran Canaria, on one of the underwater submarines with the big windows so you can see everything and all the wrecks. And that's the closest I'll get, but absolutely adored it.
I did it once in Cuba about 25 years ago, but it was a typical British holiday. So the night before, we all got drunk. Then we spent about an hour in a swimming pool testing it all out, and then went straight out on a dive. And I was severely hungover, dehydrated, all the things you shouldn't do. But one thing I did notice is the minute you hit the water and you go under, the peace and tranquility is bizarre. It's freaky. It's just lovely and silent, and you hear the bubbles from the tank, and you see the fish and the colours. They just look so much better than you can ever get on television. Some of the colours are amazing, but I think I'd like to try it in the next few years, possibly. But metal detecting's for me at the moment, sadly. But with that, you can go. Sorry,
you can take a scuba detector with you.
Exactly. I could metal detect in a river, which someone here tonight has done a few times, I think, haven't you, Gary?
Once or twice.
Yeah.
There was one wreck. I'll just tell you this quick story. Just off South Shields Beach, it's 1 mile directly out. So it's just south of the River Tyne at Tynemouth. You got big South Shields Beach, 1 mile off. There's 2 wrecks that sort of straddle. They sit on top of each other. It's called the Oslo Fjord, and the other one's the Eugenia Chandris. So the 2 World War II wrecks. One was filled with I'm going to say stores, munitions for the army as well. And the Oslo Fjord was this big troop carrier liner. So they both hit mines and sunk quickly during the Second World War. And today, because they're relatively shallow, the wrecks have been, they've had wire strops pulled across them to flatten it so it's not a hazard to other shipping. But the wreck, if you imagine 5 or 6 football pitches, that's where the wreckage is scattered all over. And it was a favourite of ours because it was relatively shallow and you could spend a long time on the wreck. You just took 20 minutes from the to get out to it as well. And it was always a good place to find bits and bobs. And on this one particular dive, I remember just swimming along past the big boilers, and I came across another diver from another boat. We were the only boat that was there on the surface. So I was really surprised to see this other diver. I was like, who the hell's he? And I just watched him, and what he was doing, he was digging this huge hole, down through the sand and the silt, right at the edge of the wreckage. And he was pulling out 2-pound anti-aircraft shells that didn't have the rounding, they were just the blank shells. So he was pulling them, and he had a pile, this huge pile. And I was like, oh my God, that's how you find the objects. You dig down. And the next time I was on that wreck, I did a similar tactic, and I found 37 of these 2-pound shells. And I was like, wow, and that was it. I became the diver who knew how to find things, because that's what I would do. When I could, you would just dig down through the sand and shale or whatever it was, and find the artifacts there. And that little lesson I learned on that particular dive stood me in really good stead for years later when in the River Wear, when I knew instinctively you had to dig to get the objects, the old objects.
I'll wait for Adrian to speak here.
I'll wait for you, Dave.
So there is the natural progression, but how did you actually come to look at a river and say, I'm going to dive in that river? Because river diving must be obviously is a totally different monster than diving in the sea, as is diving in the North Sea in comparison to into Egypt. How did it come about that you ended up deciding to dive in a river and look for things?
Yeah. Well, I live in the outskirts of Durham City, so it's an ancient medieval city with a stunning World Heritage Site and cathedral and castle. Everything's there. The city itself, if anybody's not familiar, sits in this large peninsula. So the River Wear creates this natural loop, and the castle and everything sits pretty much defended on 3 sides by the river. And one Sunday morning, my wife and I, Angela, were down in Durham doing our normal walk just around the peninsula and everything. And we ended up in a coffee shop that sits just at the edge of Framwell Gate Bridge, which is Durham's oldest bridge. and we were just chatting about things. And Angela inquired about when I was going to go diving next, but she meant the North Sea. But given that it was April, it was too early in the season. Diving was some months away. It was weeks away. And so she said, why don't you go diving in there? You're sure to find something old. And she pointed down to the River Wear. On that particular day, the river was the same colour as the coffee we were drinking. So I dismissed her idea. I said, no, that's crazy. She said, no, Durham's got this rich history. You're bound to find something. Give it a go. So a couple of weeks later, conditions improved, and I crossed the bridge again. I thought, I think she's got a point. I might just do this. So I managed to convince my brother Trevor to join me on an exploratory dive. Let's go and have a look. You never know, we might find something old. So this was April in 2007. So we had this cunning plan. Again, it was early on a Saturday morning before anybody was about. We took our cars down to Pimlico, little area of Durham, and carried our pretty heavy kit right down this big hill, down to the water's edge. And like stealthy otters, we just entered the water and we set off swimming upstream. And our very naive plan was to swim underneath Prebins Bridge, which is probably one of the youngest bridges. It's only just over 200 years old, and swim around heading towards Elvert Bridge. And with a view to, we might find something. In those days, we never had permissions to dive. But our plan was if we got caught, we would simply plead ignorance and just promise never to do it again. So we did that dive. We swam 2/3 of the way around towards New Elvert. But actually, conditions were really, we use the word grim to describe it. It was so cold. It was freezing. We had sort of like ice green foreheads with that intense cold of the water. And we never saw an eel, let alone a salmon or a trout. And so it was just muddy, sandy, gloopy stuff, and it wasn't nice. So we made a decision to turn around just to get out of there. And as we did, and we swam back underneath Prebins Bridge, and this was about less than 100 meters from our exit point. And at that moment in time, I was never ever going to go back to that river. It was so bad that I just didn't enjoy the experience at all. But Trevor spotted a trowel on the riverbed, and he picked it up, and it turns out that it was a silver trowel, and it was inscribed with the name of an Archbishop of Canterbury. So it was presented to the Lord Archbishop of Canterbury on a site provided to the diocese by the Bengal Coal Company Limited. No, not Limited, Bengal Coal Company. And there it was. It had a lovely little elephant hallmark stamp on the back. So I was like, wow, Lord Archbishop of Canterbury, how can that be? So we went home and Googled Archbishop of Canterbury, and the name Arthur Michael Ramsay sort of jumped out. So it was Bishop Ramsay happened to be the 100th Archbishop of Canterbury, but he was a man who had this long association with Durham. Way back in 1942, he was a canon at Durham Cathedral. He married his wife Joan the same year. He later became the Bishop of Durham. Then he got promoted again and became the Bishop of York, and then ultimately became the Archbishop of Canterbury. Importantly, when he retired, when he stood down from that role, he made the decision to come back with his wife back to Durham, to the city he loved, and presumably the city loved him as well. So for him, that was his home. And he came back, and ultimately the house where he spent his last years in Durham, and this is the late 1970s, early 1980s, was on the South Bailey, and it was a position less than 200 meters away from Prebins Bridge, where we'd found that trowel. So armed with that little bit of information, we decided that to go back the following morning to that spot and have a pootle about on the riverbed looking for anything else that might belong to Bishop Ramsay. And that's what we did. So I thought that surely that house had been burgled. And if that was the case, and if some mischievous youth or youths not realizing the value of the things they'd thrown in the river, perhaps there was others. So that was the rationale behind why we would go back to Prebends Bridge. And on that second dive at that spot, less than 24 hours later from when we first went in, very quickly I found this lovely bronze Corpus Christi, this little statuette. And down its flank, down its side, was stamped Lambert Rookie. And Jean Lambert Rookie was a very famous Art Deco sculptor. Even to this day in Paris, there's a museum dedicated to his work. And this was one of his pieces. So it was like, wow, a wonderful Christian symbology, this wonderful object. A few moments later, I found this large bronze bowl with a handle, and it turns out that was a baptizing spoon. So to cut a long story short, we had 3 objects. We had to do the right thing. So I was a watch manager in the Fire and Rescue Service. Trevor then was a sergeant in the Royal Horse Artillery. So we clearly were respectable members of the community. We had to do the right thing. We got an opportunity a couple of weeks later to go and meet up with them, to just randomly knock on the door of Durham Cathedral in the chapter house and just declare what we'd found and tell our story. And you can just imagine how skeptical Durham Cathedral were at that time. But eventually they believed our story, and we were commissioned to go back. We were asked to go back to that spot and do a full survey of the riverbed around Prebends Bridge with a view to finding other objects that may belong to Bishop Ramsay. And the exciting thing, the last page of the signed agreement said that 50% of the value of anything we found would be given to the finders, and the landowner, Durham Cathedral, would be entitled to the other 50%. So that's what Trevor and I did for 2 years. We went back to that spot underneath Prebends Bridge, and we found absolutely dozens of gold and silver medallions and crosses and other Christian related objects all associated with Bishop Ramsay, and that's what essentially got us into river diving. That chance find, that chance comment by my wife Angela, give it a go, and that chance discovery. Otherwise, we would never have gone back to that spot.
That's amazing.
It is. So you would suggest then it was a burglary?
No, well, the story gets eventually was broke to the national press. It was the news of the discovery was leaked to the BBC up here in the Northeast. They covered the story. The story, as you can imagine, went global. Media outlets around the world were talking about these two. We weren't really given a name. It was just 2 divers who'd stumbled upon this incredible treasure, gold and silver, that once belonged to an Archbishop of Canterbury. Lots of theories came out about how and why they ended up in the river. The cathedral supported the burglary theory, while others suspected that Bishop Ramsay himself threw the objects into the river. A very good friend of his, the Reverend Victor Stock, from, I think he was the dean, I don't know if he still is, of Guildford Cathedral. He used to travel to Durham, and whenever he was in the Northeast, he would come to Durham and meet up with his old friend, Bishop Ramsay. And, they'd go walking around the riverbanks and just catching up with old times and telling stories. And he suggests that Bishop Ramsay, there was method. I was going to say method in his madness, but there was no madness. There was these were clear decisions. During his tenure as Bishop of York and Archbishop of Canterbury, he'd amassed this huge collection of gifts. And so much so that wherever they lived, an entire room had to be given up to their storage, because these gold and silver medallions would come in quite large presentation boxes. And given that Bishop Ramsay came in, his tenure coincided with perhaps the height of the Jet Age. So he was perhaps the most travelled Archbishop of Canterbury of his, nobody was able to travel around the world as much as Archbishop Ramsay had done at that time. And wherever he went, he'd be invited by different countries, different organizations would invite him. He would go he would pretty much anticipate what was going to happen. He would go on a grand tour of certain areas. He would quite often give a talk, usually on ecclesiastical or ecclesiastical matters. And at the end of the talk, he would be almost certainly given a gift as a memento of that trip, some recognition of his lifetime achievements, whether he would be given an honorary degree, a doctorate in theology, or whatever it was. So he amassed this huge collection of gold and silver objects, and apparently he made a decision, because there were so many of them, to sell approximately 2/3 of these objects and to private dealers. I don't know if it went to auction. I think it perhaps went straight to private dealers, but the money raised went to Christian Aid. So it was a nice gesture. But as you can imagine, some of the more prestigious objects came back up for sale on the open market, and that greatly embarrassed a lot of people, and not least Bishop Ramsay as well. The organisations and institutions who had given Bishop Ramsay the objects themselves were asking questions. Why didn't he return them? So it was quite an awkward time. So he was actually at a loss with what to do with the remainder that he had. But actually, because he's High Church Anglo-Catholic, or he was High Church Anglo-Catholic, there is actually a proper set down procedure for the disposal of sacramentals. So sacramentals are blessed objects. And very simply, in the first instance, you are to burn them or set fire to them. But given these are metal objects, he couldn't do that. The second option allows you to bury them in the ground, but it has to be ground that isn't trodden upon. And bearing in mind, Bishop Ramsay by then would have been in his early 80s. It was hardly unlikely you were going to get a man at that age going off the beaten track and those steep wooded valleys in Durham to dig holes to bury his gold and silver. But the third option quite simply allows you to cast them into a stream where they'll be carried to the sea. And it seems that was the rationale behind it all, the reason behind it all. A couple of years after the news broke of the discovery of Bishop Ramsay, I was reading an article online, and I stumbled upon a book. It's the Oxford Handbook of the European Bronze Age. So it's a whole series of books. This particular one focuses on the Bronze Age. There's a contribution in the book by Professor Richard Bradley from the University of Reading, and he dedicates pretty much a whole chapter in the book to the Bishop Ramsay treasure in Durham. Now, he doesn't mention Trevor and I by name. He refers to two divers who discovered these objects. And Bishop Ramsay, Professor Bradley, he pretty much dismisses the burglary theory. He instead puts forward a couple of schools of thought. But the first one was, he asks, did Bishop Ramsay deliberately throw them in the river just to take them out of circulation, so that to ensure that nobody got them? Or did he offer them up as a gift to God? But more importantly, he makes that connection with the acts of our Bronze Age ancestors. So you'll each know of a precious object that's been discovered in a river, whether it's a helmet, a shield, a sword, or a spear. These discoveries have happened in recent years all around Europe, and it seems that votive offering that our Bronze Age ancestors was doing, potentially Bishop Ramsay himself in this modern day was doing very similar. So do look that book up. It's really interesting, and the whole paragraph's dedicated to the Oxford Handbook of the European Bronze Age.
Interesting. Do you think, Gary, because, that would never have been found if you and your brother hadn't suddenly decided to go out diving. But since you found that, you mentioned earlier about you didn't have permissions. Do you feel it enabled you more now going forward to get the correct permissions by people because of what you found?
Yeah, way back in 2007, with benefit of hindsight, we had to sort of realize, we appreciate that somebody must have owned that land. And we never anticipated finding anything of so precious in our wildest dreams. We never knew what we were going to do with those objects if we did find them. I was vaguely aware of the Portable Antiquity Scheme, but I didn't anticipate finding gold and silver medallions and crosses and everything. So, but your conscience tells you that you have to do the right thing, and very fortunately, from day one, we've done that. By way of a coincidence, following that initial approach to the cathedral, we very quickly were introduced to the resident archaeologist for Durham Cathedral, and we had an agreement whereby literally everything that we found in Prebends, and many of the objects weren't associated with Bishop Ramsey, were given to the archaeologist to be recorded. And we got to know Norman very well. He would methodically record them. He, at that time, he wasn't doing anything digitally. He would literally handwrite everything out. But he was an absolute wonderful, lovely guy. He's still doing the same job today. And he taught us so much about recording everything. The question on permissions became very clear soon afterwards. You suddenly realise, yeah, we did the right thing. We've now got permissions to dive on this land, and actually every river in the UK, somebody would probably own it, or 99.5%. So somebody owns it. And then when we start to find all the objects that qualified to be recorded on the Portable Antiquity Scheme, Norman directed us to the Fines Liaison Officer, who at that time was Francis McIntosh. And you make that connection with the FLO, you learn from them, you start very quickly. Within 6 months, I was able to upload objects myself to the Portable Antiquity Scheme website, and I thought that was an amazing thing to do. It was really exciting. And so slowly but surely, the knowledge begins to wrap itself around you. When you start reading the books, the information's just there. Now it's just a couple of clicks on the computer, just a quick search on Google or Bing, and you can get that information. But 2007, it was different. But by doing the right thing from day one has paid huge dividends, because you now have that trust, you have that understanding and appreciation of what you're doing, the reason you're going out metal detecting or searching a river for an object. You can't just be doing it for monetary gain. It has to be much, much more than that. If you are just doing it for monetary gain, then for me, you're a treasure hunter, and that's not what it's about at all.
Mm-hmm. I've got a question from one of the viewers, Nicola Roberts. She asked, what did you use to find the objects? Did you use any kind of metal detector?
Initially, no, not at Prebends Bridge. The question of finances and money and costs and everything, we could never afford a metal detector. Certainly one that could be used underwater. And as it turns out, because at Elvet it's a scheduled ancient monument, you're not allowed to use a metal detector within 200 meters of it anyway. I can't remember, I bet it was about 10 years ago now. I got approached by a metal detecting magazine, a gentleman who sort of was the editor, and he suggested that if they loaned me an underwater metal detector, and I did a write-up on it, I could keep it. So I was like, yes, please. Yeah, definitely. I'll have a go at that. And that was an Excalibur 2, a Minelab Excalibur 2 metal detector, which I still use to this day. If you watched River Hunters the other night, this new Rave metal detector, it's exactly the same one. It's 10 years old. And Rick thinks it's this fantastic new Rave, wonderful device, and he's so jealous. That's another story. But that I got an opportunity to use that one. I was conscious of the 200 meter limit for the Elvet Bridge. So there was a section of the river much further downstream, and we're in the site of an old ford, and I can remember using it down there and getting signals through. And I was thinking, wow, this is amazing, because you're swimming along, it looks either rocky or muddy. Where do you start digging? If you dug down, you're not necessarily going to find something, but that detector honed in on the signals so well. And once you get used to it, and it was like another world, and just a few inches underneath the sill. Never used a tool. It was always hand, just wafting away the sills and moving stones. And there the objects just came out. That was before the days of pinpointers as well. So using the metal detector underwater was something that worked really, really well. But at Elvid, I couldn't do that. However, I didn't need to, because I developed this technique based on the lessons I'd learned years earlier on Eugenia Chandra's to dig holes. And I think it's the nature of the riverbed at Elvid. It's undulating bedrock, of sandstone bedrock. It's got these gullies and everything in. You can't really see them because they're covered in this sort of layer, this hard layer, almost like a pie crust. And once you smash through it, it's only about an inch thick. It becomes quite loose. You can actually put your hands underneath and flip it up, but everything underneath that is really loose. And to be honest, now, for the last 8 or 9 years, when I've been excavating at Elvis, it's all done by hand. But it's almost like being use the analogy of an open cast coal mine, where you're methodically going forward. You're taking the top layers off and you're pushing them back. Eyes like a hawk, you're looking for these small finds. And I go down about 1 meter, and then you hit the bedrock again. So nothing can go beneath the bedrock, obviously. And I'm excavating this gully that's about 1 meter wide by 1 meter deep. And near the bottom, there's this dark earth layer, almost like a layer of a seam of coal. But it's only about 2 or 3 inches deep. But clearly, it's of interest. It's an occupation layer, and it's crammed, packed with late medieval small finds. So I don't need the metal detector. It would just be a clumsy thing, and I wouldn't use. So just methodically excavating through, eyes like a hawk, and being meticulous and picking up these small finds. And that's why on any given dive at Elvid, I'll find between 100 and 150 objects.
Wow. It might be worth mentioning, Gary, before you came on the show, you told us how many finds you've actually found. I don't know if you want to tell the viewers, because I was quite impressed.
Well, that's only from one particular site, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Gary?
yeah.
So at New Elvid, I've found 13,584 small finds, typically small metal finds. There is animal and ceramic objects in amongst them as well. Pottery sherds, animal bone, oyster shells, for example, as well. But typically, it's the material culture. It's the dive into Durham project that I've set up to research these objects. Pretty much, just check out the website. It sets out our vision, our aims and objectives, what it is we're trying to do. So it's all in there. You can catch up with that later. But essentially, we are trying to recover these objects for 2 reasons. Not just to put them in a box in a cupboard and say, oh, we've got them. We are researching them. So our vision really is to have as many of the objects researched as possible. I do a great amount of that research, but also I work very closely with the Department of Archaeology at Durham University and engage their students. So their students, every year when they get a new cohort, and these are MA master's students undertaking the Museum and Artifact Studies module, they are each given one of my objects. It could be a buckle or a pin. It could be a button, a coin, a lead cross seal. Any one of the thousands of objects, and they have to produce a 3,000-word research report on the objects, and that's part of their coursework, and that gets marked and assessed. But at their disposal, they've got a wide range of analytical scientific equipment at their disposal. So EDXRF, scanning electron microscopes, have got everything that they can use to analyze, to read those objects. So the 13,500 objects that we've got, we call it the Dive into Durham project. It's been described as the largest collection of late and post-medieval small finds in the northeast of England. It is a regional and national resource. And I guess one of the best things about the whole assemblage is that the level of preservation of the objects is absolutely stunning. And that's because they've come from this anaerobic layer, like I've just described, about a meter below the riverbed where there's no oxygen, so there's no corrosion. So these objects are coming out in pristine condition. We even have surviving textile and leather just coming out, just like what a mudlark would find in the Thames in the anaerobic mud down there. And they're exactly the same sort of objects as well. So if we can get these objects researched as much as we possibly can, and some of the better, more exciting objects end up on display in the museum. So we have this pretty special Museum of Archaeology on Palace Green in Durham, and they've got a Dive into Durham exhibition ongoing. And actually this summer, there's another cohort of students working on an online exhibition. And it's going to be the first one ever that they've done. And that'll go live sometime in the summer. I'm thinking late June. Fantastic. And that'll be really exciting looking forward to that. Yeah.
Luke, could you just share the screen for me, please? I've got some images of some of the finds from this particular site. No, not that one. Not that one, the other one. There we go. So I've pulled up these images anyway. Obviously, you've got yourself. Come on. There you are. Some fantastic. Just that's. Remember from season 1 of River Hunters, isn't it?
Yeah, I absolutely love these objects. They all came out in a nice little cluster. The tray, the jugs, the sugar bowls, and most of them featured on the episode, but they didn't feature the duck. And I don't know if you can just make out that little duck just on the right side. Just looking. Yeah, he was absolutely fantastic. And these are these sort of came from. I had it down as what sort of like the colonial period, where you might have had a British officer, perhaps working in or dispatched to India, doing some tour of duty out there and bringing back souvenirs of that. And maybe, just maybe, those objects were stolen from his house in Tewkesbury and just dumped in the river. So that's what we thought about them ones. They're about 120, 130 years old. And some lovely little silver pieces in there.
And it really was fantastic how they all came out together as well. Same spot.
Yeah, there's even a pair of silver tongs in there as well, and strange little discs. We didn't know what many of the objects were. And you know what? I don't know where those objects are now. I'd love to know. I would have loved to have had the opportunity to research them a bit more as well.
What's the duck, Gary?
It's a duck, mate. A duck goes quite.
Yeah, what is it? Is it a pot or is it just a duck?
It's it opens up, the top comes off. So is it turin? Oh, I forget. I don't know the word.
No.
Turin, that's the word. There's a little set of tongs inside it. So you would have
sugar tongs, maybe little sugar thing.
Sugar bowl, yeah. A lot of the stuff was copper, but silver plated. Yeah, and there was a couple of pure silver bits as well. But an amazing find with my Garrett AT Max. Picked them up straight away.
Do you know when the guy from the TV company sent us over the bump for this season? I forwarded it over to Adrian as well, so he could watch the first episode. And he said to me, "I don't really want to watch it." I said, "Why?" He went, "Because I'll just end up wanting to go river hunting."
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it's something my dad, when he was probably about 15, had a snorkel with a huge, great bit of hose pipe on and like a ping pong ball at the end at the top of the snorkel. And he used to go down our local river and then it was sort of pre-pollution, as it's cleaner now. But he used to find stuff. It was mainly farming tools like scythes and bits and bobs and bottles and stuff. But now, obviously, the rivers are getting cleaner, I think, than they were in the 70s and 80s. But when you are diving, Gary, do you find a lot, or have you noticed since 2007, a lot more like plastic, for example, and junk?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Every that river where at Tewkesbury there was the Swillgate, and it was when we first arrived at that site. I looked at the river and I thought, guys, we can't go in here. Look at the broken glass. The modern detritus was horrendous. Plastic bottles, they are everywhere. It's just appalling, actually. And every river I've been in, you see it stuck in the trees, particularly when there's been a flood. I was down the Trent just a month or so ago on a recce, and the River Trent is a huge river. But whenever it floods, the trees on either side act as big nets, and they catch everything that comes down. And it was just awful to see the number of bottles, plastic bottles. And it's high up in a tree, 5 or 6 meters above the river level. And it's the same on the riverbed, whether it's in a major town, major city centre. The last episode that we do, I think it's the 4th episode in season 2, is at Canterbury, the River Stour, and clearly an incredibly beautiful medieval city. You've got houses right there on. And I don't know if you've been to Canterbury before, the River Stour sort of splits up and goes through in a couple of different routes. And the number of there's a lot of Second World War bomb damage in the river. Given that it says Canterbury itself is a major shrine for Thomas à Becket, we were hopeful that we would find something from that period. But you've got to get through the modern detritus first, and the broken glass, the bottles in there, just scary. The river itself is crystal clear, and once you find a really nice, good part, it was relatively safe to dig. But getting through that modern detritus it doesn't matter where you are. It seems it's everywhere in the rivers. So they're running clear, but the modern plastic and the modern rubbish is still there, and that's the heartbreaking thing.
There's a new documentary come out on Netflix this past week. Can't remember what it's called, See Something, and it's all about plastic pollution and the micro things in the ocean and whatnot. And a few people have actually said, I aren't eating fish anymore. So it's everywhere. Natural pollution. That's the population for it, isn't it? How we are now. Not we, as in we, but we as in their population, sadly. Tell us about this picture, Gary. It's a lovely little cross you've got.
Isn't it just? It's there it goes. So it's a little pectoral cross with equal length flaring arms. It's silver. So in England, that means it's treasure. Got to be reported through the coroner. Goes through the treasure trove process. Found that particular one in 2019. It was one of the last dives I did at Elbert. It came out. It's got some nice little open work in the centre, and some lovely decoration on each of those arms as well. So that particular object has been conserved in the conservation labs in the Department of Archaeology. A student has actually researched it as part of her coursework. She's dated it to the 14th, 15th century, which is what we anticipated, and that coincides with the height of pilgrimage to the shrine of St. Cuthbert of Durham. Its form is very, very similar to Cuthbert's equal-length flaring pectoral cross. For those that don't know, it's this late 7th century golden cloisonné cross with the open cell work and the garnets inlaid in there. But our particular one, that particular one, is silver with decoration that's not dissimilar to Cuthbert's. Given that St. Cuthbert's shrine is 315 metres away or so from the find site, and along with the fact that very close to where I found that sign, pilgrim sign or pilgrim badge, I found several, nearly 25 other pilgrim badges, and there's 3 pilgrims ampulla as well come out. It seems that pilgrims en route to the shrine of St. Cuthbert during that late medieval period were pausing on Elvet Bridge, either at St. Andrew's Church, which was positioned at the bottom of the bridge, or at a booth or a bothy, one of the stalls that was on the bridge. And it's only a theory, but we think that pilgrims around Europe would, when they went to a shrine, they would buy evidence, they would buy the T-shirt of that trip. But in those days, it used to be a little badge, a pilgrim badge that they could either wear affixed to their hat or suspended around the neck. And the iconography of that badge had something associated with the shrine or the saint that they'd gone to see. But quite often they would buy 2 of these badges, and it seems for purely votive reasons, they would deliberately throw one into a watery context for as a thank offering for a safe passage or safe return home. So they're clearly very superstitious. So the discovery of the 20 plus pilgrims badges and signs at Durham adds to this growing theory that's developing that pilgrims were deliberately doing that. And we found silver quartz to date. Similar pilgrim badges have been found in other riverine sites, for example, the River Thames in London, in the Mill Stream at Salisbury, even in Bristol in the dock, which has been dredged on numerous occasions. And there's a belief there that those pilgrim badges are associated with the shrine of Compostela, Santiago de Compostela in Spain, because during the medieval period, that's where the ships would return the pilgrims back from that grand pilgrimage to Spain. And when they disembarked in docks at Bristol, they would throw a pilgrim badge into the river as a thank offering, and it seems what's happening. So that silver cross that you've just seen there is clearly important. I've just been in discussion with Bishop Auckland Castle. They've got a brand new museum called the Faith Museum. It's going to open in 2024, I believe. So it's got, and they're going to house a number of pilgrim badges and other faith-related objects, and one of which may well be that cross. So I'm really proud to be associated with Bishop Auckland Castle's museum there.
Fantastic. I'm just going to jump through a couple of images. You can see Gary loving his time in the river there. And we'll get on to, these are some of the cloth seals that you mentioned. Now it's the Durham lead cloth seal assemblage is what it's known as totally, is it?
It is, yes. 328 of these little lead cloth seals constitutes the largest collection of such objects available for analysis outside of London, so it's of national importance. The lead seals themselves, if you don't know much about them, they're these little enigmatic little objects that are individually stamped with some information. It could be a privy mark, a ligature, a royal device, some evidence of the man who affixed it to the bolted cloth when it was manufactured. So in England, since the time of Edward III, if you were a weaver who intended to sell your finished product, your bolted cloth, you couldn't do so unless a crown-appointed official inspected it first. And they were called alnagers. And an alnage official were very unpopular men, as you can imagine. They had the power of entry. They could come into your home, inspect your cloth, and if it didn't conform to the standards, to the regulations, they could actually seize it. But typically, a bolt of cloth would have one of these affixed by the alnager. It was evidence that the tax had been paid, normally twopence per broadcloth, and twopence went to the alnager as well for the act of doing this. And when he sealed that onto the cloth, it imparted that ligature, that privy mark. And that is almost like a postcard from the past, because once you learn how to read and interpret these little signs, they tell you so much. And in Durham, that particular one is really interesting. It's got a capital letter A there on one side, and on the other side of the cloth seal is a pine cone device. Now, the pine cone is a heraldic device for the city of Augsburg in southern Germany, a town or city, that's 900 miles from Durham. So the A is a capital letter for Augsburg. These were once attached to fustian cloth, and they were really popular cloth, and they were shipped all the way up to probably Amsterdam, over the coast, over the channel to London. London dyers quite often would dye these blue, and then they would be shipped up the north sea coast, all the way up to Durham. This particular one probably dates to 1620. So I've got about 29 Augsburg cloth seals. So it's wonderful evidence of trade and definitely consumption of cloth. Yeah.
And obviously, images like this and the papers that you've written and the information that's available via websites and what have you is also a fantastic learning curve for metal detectorists who have found similar.
Yes, absolutely. There's so little known about lead cloth seals. You always see it on groups on Facebook. Does anybody know what this is? And Stuart Elton, a friend of mine who specialises in lead cloth seals, he's recently wrote a book, had it published, and that's fantastic. You know, it sort of like puts into one place all of these books. What I've been able to do with Durham is, and this was my thesis, was on lead cloth seals, was to sort of really analyse the objects themselves, identify the trade networks. And I was very fortunate that approximately 30% of the cloth seals I found have surviving woolen textiles trapped between the two discs. So as part of my research, I made the decision to actually literally prise apart the lead discs and extract that woolen textile. And that can tell us so much. You can work out such things as the thread count. So that tells you how the finery, how fine the textile was. You work out the warp, the weft, the twist that was in there. And I had an opportunity to go up to Glasgow, University of Glasgow. Sorry, I'm trying to forget what it's called. Glasgow University. And we went to the Centre for Textile Conservation and Technical Art History, which is based in Glasgow University. And for the first time ever in the UK, we performed some ultra-high performance liquid chromatography analysis on the textile. And we successfully extracted colorants related to the dyes. So we were able to say for the first time exactly what colour these garments were, that the cloth was. So that in itself is, something to be incredibly proud about, and obviously I was. The thesis is being converted into a book now, and I hope to get it published at the back end of this year. It's going to be an arc and arc monologue. An arc and arc research report. I'm really excited for that.
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
Well, we're just going to. We're not going to break, but we are going to break. It's coming up to the time of the Big Detecting Show prize draw, courtesy of Diggers Dips. This week, Luke, can you share the screen back to me, please? Thank you. First prize this week is Reading Beaches book. Second prize is the cleaning pencil from thecleaningpencil.com. Thanks to Graham Dempsey for that. And 5 Diggers Dips tokens is third prize. Don't forget, if you do want to enter this competition, you can only do this solely via the Big Metal. He's wrote Big Metal Detecting Show there. It's not the Big Metal Detecting Show. It's the Big Detecting Show. On Facebook, you can join that. It's free to join. You have to be a member of the Diggers Dips prize draw site to do so, though. So, Gary, we are looking at a number between 1 and 40, please.
39.
39. Adrian?
31.
27. Oh. Not going to get it right again, are you?
Oh, no.
Number 35. Congratulations, John Cornwall, reading Beach's book. Second number, please, Gary.
27.
Adrian?
3.
I'll go 14. Dead exciting, this, Gary. We're on the edge of our seat every week doing this.
I suppose the cleaning pencil is something that isn't relevant to Gary, is it? Because his stuff's quite clean.
It's something that I'm going to... number 21 wins the cleaning pencil. Giuseppe, well done. I'll get back to that in a moment. Gary,
yes.
Number 3. Number 3. Third number.
16.
Adrian?
23.
And I'll go 14 again. The cleaning pencil, the product, it's basically a composite pencil, like your old-fashioned engineering pencils that you click for fine detail, cleaning up coins and such like. But there's a big range now. There's a Gladius fluid, which number 37, Dominic Tomczyk. Well done there. So congratulations, John Cornwall, first prize, Giuseppe, second prize, and Dominic Tomczyk, third prize. They will be contacted via Diggers Dips via an email, and you'll be able to sort out that between yourselves. Thanks again to Chris and the team from Diggers Dips, and to Graham from the Cleaning Pencil Company, and his wife, Natasha, or Natalia, is it? Natalia. Nat. Thank you all very much. I'll stop sharing now and come back to the norm. So, yes, the cleaning pencil, I'll talk you through that off screen, Gary, because it's the whole range is fantastic. They've got the wax and everything that to clean it and preserves it as well. So it's a nice little, I mean, you've got access to other things, obviously, but you've got access to all sorts of X-ray machines and such like, so you don't need that. It's already there.
Fully blown conservation lab, yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know if it's showing it when the thing. I've actually got the book that you were on about, the Stuart Elton book on cloth seals. There's one or two of yours in there as well, I believe.
Yes, I've got a couple of rare ones that haven't been found elsewhere in the UK, so Stuart's referenced them, which is always good.
Fantastic.
Gary, just looking at that last illustration picture back, it was about 2 centimetres. Are they all normally that sort of size, or bigger, smaller?
Yeah, the later, so 17th, 18th century cloth seals are quite large. I'm trying to think about the size of a 50 pence coin. Really early ones, small as a 5 pence coin, but average 17th century 2-part lead cloth seals are the norm, and they're about the size of a 10 pence piece, with a short interconnecting strip holding them both together.
Right.
So obviously people know, you started the start of the show telling people, where they'll know you from, which would be obviously the media through the work that you've done in the past, but also via River Hunters, which started the second season, Monday just gone. So there'll be reruns of the first episode going on currently on the History Channel. How did you come about becoming a member of the River Hunters team?
Yeah, it was pretty early on, to be honest. I think it was maybe 3.5 years ago now. I was approached by Hello Halo TV, who are based in Glasgow. They had an idea about sending some people around the UK to search rivers, and the concept was they were going to bring in a couple of people. They weren't sure who, but they needed a an underwater archaeologist, an archaeologist who would come onto the show and help identify the objects. So that was my initial brief. Developed the show with them behind the scenes. I remember they coming down to Durham to hear me one of my lectures, and they were suitably impressed. I seem to have quite a good knowledge of small finds, typically English small finds, objects that you might expect to find in rivers. So I was always going to play a key part in the show. Eventually, they secured the services of Bo We Met, or Aquachigga, as he's very fondly known. Clearly a very popular guy on YouTube, huge following. He's an all-round lovely man. He'd do anything to help. He's so keen, so full of enthusiasm, and he's this machine. He just goes on and on and on. Works right through the lunch, through the tea breaks, in the early evening. You've got to drag him out of the water. So he's a wonderful guy to have on the show. And then the last person to come on board, as far as I know, was Rick Edwards. Rick is, and when you think, oh, why Rick? Why is it his thing? Is it something he would genuinely believe in and want to become a part of it? Given his background in TV and media, had nothing to do with adventures and jumping in rivers and things like that. But to his credit, Rick has totally taken this on board. He absolutely loves it, and he's a consummate professional. He really is. He gets into it. He's talking about the plot. Apart from linking it all together, which he does so well, he genuinely wants to get into the water and find an object, anything that is better than an object Bo has found. That's his challenge, and so many times he does it. It seems it's a typical. The plot basically is Rick and Bo drive to a spot. Rick's got some fantastic information about it. There's a real important reason they need to be there. It's an ancient battlefield site, for example. And the likelihood of finding objects is really high because all of these dead people ended up in the water at that spot. And they'll arrive at the site, have a bit of a chinwag about it, just come up with a brief plan, and then they'll both go in. And that's when Rick makes his discovery. He'll pull out that silver Roman coin in that first 15 minutes. And for him, that's job done. And that's just the way it's happened so many times. It's weird. So they mess about in the river. Because Rick needs some more information, he'll go off to find some more information about another site. But they need somebody to keep Bo company. So I get dragged in and I get stuck in with Bo, and together we are in there looking for objects. And quite often all three of us are in there, and it's just absolutely great fun. Bit of competition, loads of banter. We really enjoy doing. It's just this massive adventure of discovery, and it's just so well put together. But for me, for all three of us, really, we know that the viewer wants to see objects, wants to see us make those discovery, and we never know what it is we're going to find. And some of the objects come out so random, so weird. What in the hell is that doing here? How has that object got in this bit of river? And many objects, we literally don't know what they are. Nobody knows what they are. Just the curse of the strange iron object, I guess. But many of the small finds are instantly recognizable. And that's where I sort of come into my own, where given all of the knowledge I've got from my finds in Durham and working with the Department of Archaeology, I can bring something to the scene, explain, perhaps describe how it's important. So that's essentially the show. I remember I rendezvoused with the team up at Corbridge. We were looking to investigate the ancient, one of the sites potentially was going to be the Roman bridge at Corbridge. And so we rendezvoused up there. It was the first time I met sort of some of the senior directors, producers of the show. And they came up there. And I took them to the site of the ancient Roman crossing, which you can just make out to this day. Some of the piers are still in the river. And I was explaining, why this site's important, and we've got Roman legions crossing at this point and everything. And the lady who was with us, I won't mention the name, but she says, Gary, just what you've just said there on camera, will you do it again? Just say it again, but on camera. I need to capture your enthusiasm and the way you've just described what would have happened 2,000 years ago at this spot. So she did it. She recorded it on her phone, and unbeknown to me, she went back and she says, "Look, I think I found somebody who can be that." I wouldn't say anchorman, but somebody who would be that constant in the shows. And that was it. They reached out and said, "Gary, would you do the whole series?" Unfortunately, with season 1, I had a pre-booked family holiday, which was lovely. However, it meant I missed 3 episodes. I was pretty gutted by that. I really was. But I couldn't cancel my family holiday. But season 2 come along, and there I am. I'm in every episode, and quite instrumental in lots of the discoveries. And that banter, adventure, and discovery is something that is this theme that runs through. And this season, particularly, we find some amazing objects. We really do.
I was near to tears when you found the not sword and found out it wasn't a sword. No, better be a sword, and it wasn't. That was so heartbreaking. But the hand grenade from, was it about the 1700s that Bo found, was absolutely, that again is a find of national significance.
It truly is, yes, from the Battle of Killiecrankie or the Battle of Rinrory. It actually had 2 names, that battle, and Rinrory being the name of a house, a building that was actually in the centre of the battlefield. And 1689, so it was the Jacobite rebellion, the first time you had a Jacobite victory against the government troops, and the Redcoats were effectively decimated. It truly was. Something like 2,500 men in total died on that battlefield. If you imagine this big, long Scottish glen, you've got the River Garry running all the way through it. And the government forces were stretched out over some considerable distance, so thin, in fact, that the soldiers were only 3 deep. And there were 7 government regiments lined up, all facing uphill, looking at the clansmen who were just out of range. But strangely, there was only 6 clan regiments available. So it was 6 against 7. So as the battle unfolded, the regiment, I think it was Leven's regiment, who were in the centre, were untouched. So as the Highland troops stormed down the hill, and I think 600 of them were took out in that initial volley of musket shot. But there was enough to just run through the regiment in front of them, hack the Redcoats to pieces. Many of them turned and fled and tried to get across the river. But the second that clan's job was done, their next thing in their mind was to run off to the baggage train and steal as much loot as they possibly could. And that's what they did. So the whole battle was over in 20 minutes or so. But incredibly, in the centre, you had this Leven's regiment of men unscathed, untouched, and half of Hastings' regiment were just next to them. They survived. So they joined together. They made for the battlefield was pretty much deserted. So they made for this Rinrory house, and they made a decision. They could either defend, get themselves behind the big walls, and fire muskets to keep off the clansmen. But they were really isolated, and they never knew whether they were going to get replenished or anything. So they made a decision in the hours of darkness, so about midnight or so, to go down the track and cross the River Garry at the site of this ford. And the second they were over the river, they were essentially free. They were home free, and that's what happened. So about 900 men crossed the river at this particular point. And I went up to do the recce, and we walked the river. We walked the battlefield site, and for the first time you get this comprehension of how massive it was, and you realise that those men who survived crossed the river at a certain point. And I had a massive breakthrough. I found an old map of, I think it was 1864, of the area, and it actually had the ford marked on. So I was able to line up all of the surviving the features and pinpoint the spot of that crossing. So I went back to the TV company, and actually I filmed it as well, and History Channel put that on the TV. It's on YouTube, my actual recce at that spot. And I said, this is where you have to go. So that's why we ended up searching that particular spot, and I was pretty proud to be part of that discovery, albeit I wasn't allowed in the river that day.
So for the rest of the season, obviously, I'm not going to ask for any spoilers of consequence, but we have a lot to look forward to.
We truly do. I think you're going to see me in the River Ouse in York with my full scuba kit. I think I'm the first person to officially do a dive in Ouse, an archaeological search. To say it was the toughest dive of my life is an understatement. It was horrific. It was so dark. It's very peaty, the Ouse, and I was down about 10 meters down. Eventually, I was able to identify a spot on the riverbed that I could dig because there was so much sand, it was too deep. But in this one spot, I was able to move some big blocks away, like big boulders. Underneath them were some sort of bricks that were Georgian house bricks, so really thin bricks. Just throwing them away. And once I got them, a sort of hole about the size of a car steering wheel on the riverbed, I dug this search. And you've got to imagine it was pitch black. So there's me with all my kit on, got comms on, so I'm talking to the surface, to Bo and Rick on the surface, telling them what I'm doing. And then I started to find artifacts, and it was like right at the very end, the last half an hour after being underwater for 3 hours, I started to find them because I was so fearful I was going to put that effort in and I wasn't going to come up with anything because it was so challenging. But I did, and I found over 50 objects, and you'll see on Monday night what they were.
Wow.
A tiny spoiler, some are medieval.
Oh. You said, Gary, about how dark it was with all the peat and that, and you've done night dives abroad. In the series, or have you ever dived at night in the UK in a river?
I have, yes. I've dived at New Elvet in the River Weir in the night time, and it's like being in daylight. It was the weirdest thing because all of the ambient lights, the street lights, the building lights, they just go straight through the water. And if the water's clear, light can pass through it. So even though I had a torch, almost I didn't need it. But in the Ouse, even in the middle of the day when the sun's high, there's so much peat in the water. By the time you're down 10 meters, all of that light's filtered out. So when you see the footage on Monday night, and you'll see behind me, it is pitch black. It really is. And to be honest, it's claustrophobic. It's scary.
Yeah.
I kept having visions of this big monster coming out the dark and just swallowing me. It was just a horrible place to be. It really was.
We look forward to that.
Brilliant.
Anyway, Gary, it's 9:30. We've kept you lots. We try and keep to that because people switch off and everything. But I'm sure, Adrian, we could go on for another 2 hours, couldn't we, easily?
Yeah, it was like sitting in the pub tonight, unfortunately, without the alcohol. And Dave, you've got to ring the bell because we could go on for hours, I think, listening to this. It's really interesting.
I can hit me coat.
You got a bell.
I can hit me coat can with a pen.
But no, thanks, Gary. Really interesting.
Gary, can you give... Sorry, Adrian.
Sorry, Gary, have you got a YouTube channel you want to share?
Yes, YouTube, Gary Bankhead. I've just uploaded a playlist. I've got 6 videos up there, and you'll see in excess of over 450 or 500 small finds being discovered. And I take them back home, tip them out on the table and go through them on my finds tray and just explain what they are. Really informative. I just launched that a few weeks ago, so do give me a follow. Instagram, Gary Bankhead. There you go, guys. Thank you. I definitely need those subscribers.
Well, I've just subscribed. I was number 112.
I'll follow you. I've subscribed and I'll follow you on Instagram now. That'll be the one.
Yeah, Instagram, Twitter, everything is just Gary Bankhead, underwater archaeologist. And dive into Durham.uk is the website. It's packed with information. Got some great photographs of the small finds. And it's nothing but education, adventure, discovery, just a great little world to be in. And there's my dive kit there.
Well, what I'll do over the weekend, Gary, when I'm not at work because I'm there now a lot, I will push the channel for you. I'll put a post up on the website and push the channel, get you some more subscribers that way. But I can't see it being very long before that takes off massively, to be fair.
Yeah, agree.
I'm going to do some work with the History Channel to get some. We're going to do quite a lot more videos this next summer. So I'm quite excited by that. So slowly but surely, it'll really ramp up the number of videos on there.
Fantastic. Well, I'll be keeping it. Well, I've subscribed now. I'll be keeping an eye out anyway. Because obviously I find it so intriguing and interesting. I mean, the closest I get is magnet fishing, and it's not even it's nothing on what you're doing there straight away. So it's Gary Bankhead on YouTube and obviously Twitter and Instagram, and Dive into Durham is the website with all the information on the work that Gary's been doing and what all the artifacts and such like that he's found in over the last 10 years or so. No, 14, 15 years. Yes, so fantastic. So before we say goodbye to Gary, we're going to play out tonight with two videos. One I've had to put on this end because, there it is. Look at that. One we've had to go from this end because Luke hasn't been able to download it properly as of yet. So I'll run that commercial from this end, which is the new. In fact, this advert, Gary will explain what we were talking to you about the composite cleaning pencils. So this video that I'll play shortly will do that, and then the readers' finds from this week, and there's some absolutely stunning ones, including. Bronze Age spear that Bob Younger found at the weekend. So keep your eyes out for that as well. And that'll be on YouTube in the morning as well. So, Gary, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'd love to have you back in the future because, I don't think we've scratched the surface, really.
No.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And obviously, if there's anything that you want us to put out to the readers of the magazine or the viewers, any updates, any press releases regarding the dive into Durham and such like, again, please give me a shout and we'll be more than happy to cascade that out for you, no problem. So, Gary Bankhead, it's been a pleasure, and we will see you on Monday night at 9 o'clock on the History Channel in Rivers Hunters.
Thanks, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cheers,
It's
Gary.
been a pleasure for us too. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And thank you to everybody for viewing tonight. Thank you to Adrian and as ever to Luke. Luke, video number 1, if you please. That was video number 1. And now I've got to find video number 2, which is, it's there. And it's the right one this week as well. So good night, everybody. Thanks for viewing. I will see you all next week with Kerry Fuller from the Lost Tapes of History podcast. Good night, everyone.